Look at this baby. So gentle, so innocent. You'd think this child would grow up to become a kind man, a man of honesty, integrity, maybe even greatness. Well, think again, for this child would one day plunge the entire world into darkness. Alarm siren blares. This is the story of Adolf Hitler. But not the dictator, you already know. This is the story of how a frail little boy, born in a forgotten corner of Austria, transformed into one of history's most terrifying figures. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in a small town called Braunau am Inn, then part of Austria. His father, Alois Schicklgruber, was a man with a complicated past. Born illegitimate, he later changed his surname to Hitler after taking on his stepfather's name. Alois wasn't a poor man. He worked as a mid-level customs officer. But he wasn't exactly a kind man either. Strict, stubborn, and quick to anger. He lived more for himself than for his family. Women seemed to orbit around a lot. He married an older, wealthy woman, then cheated on her with younger lovers, one of whom was Clara Paulzel, his cousin. Yes, cousin! When his second wife fell sick and died, Alois wasted no time. He married Clara, and together they would bring Adolf into the world. But fate was cruel to Clara. Before Adolf's birth, she had already lost 3 children in infancy. So when Adolf arrived, frail but alive, she adored him with an almost suffocating love. He was her precious survivor, the boy she spoiled, the boy she feared losing. This imbalance shaped him deeply, an authoritarian father on one side, and an overprotective, doting mother on the other. The Hitler household was tense. Adolf's father ruled with an iron fist, often shouting and lashing out at his children. At first, most of his anger was directed at Adolf's older half-brother. But when that boy ran away at age 14, 7-year-old Adolf became the primary target. Every misstep, every mistake, earned him a beating. Meanwhile, Clara hovered over him, worrying over his health, shielding him whenever she could. In school, young Adolf showed promise. He was bright, enthusiastic, and teachers praised his creativity. He enjoyed gathering other children and leading them in war games, staging battles in the playground. His imagination was vivid, his leadership natural. But then came tragedy. At age 10, Adolf's younger brother, Edmund, died of measles. Adolf loved him deeply, and when Edmund's coffin was laid to rest in the cemetery across from their house, something inside the boy changed. Neighbors recalled strange behavior. The boy wandering at night, staring at the stars from the cemetery wall, or whispering to trees as if they could answer him. He withdrew. His grades declined, and his relationship with his father only grew worse. As Adolf entered high school, things got harder. The city boys mocked his rural background. He repeated a grade, lost interest in most subjects, and spent his time sketching buildings, daydreaming, and reading adventure novels about American frontiersmen. But beneath these innocent hobbies burned defiance. One day, Alois declared, "Son, you will follow in my footsteps. You will be a public official." Adolf snapped back. "No, father. I will be an artist. I will soar high above the clouds with the eagles." This enraged Alois. But the old man was growing weak. Soon after, in 1903, he collapsed from a lung hemorrhage and died. For Adolf, it was bittersweet. The tyrant of his childhood was gone, yet so was the stability of the household. Clara held the family together, but she too was frail. Adolf scraped by in school, barely passing, but when the final national exam came, he simply dropped out. At 16, he was unemployed, directionless, yet convinced that destiny had reserved greatness for him. Adolf's passion was art. He sketched buildings and landscapes, convinced he could become a painter or an architect. At 18, he packed his things, said a tearful goodbye to his mother, and traveled to Vienna to take the entrance exam for the Academy of Fine Arts. He failed, not once, but twice. The professors saw little talent in his people sketches. His drawings lacked life, though they admitted he was skilled at architectural lines. But Adolf wanted glory in art, not just blueprints. Then tragedy struck again. His beloved mother Clara fell gravely ill with breast cancer. Adolf returned home, watching helplessly as she withered away. In December 1907, Clara died. The family doctor later recalled that he had never seen anyone so devastated by grief as Adolf was at her bedside. Now completely alone, Adolf drifted back to Vienna. But without family support or income, life was merciless. He lived in shelters, sold postcards of his paintings for scraps, and often went hungry. It's difficult to pinpoint the exact moment Adolf's twisted ideology formed. But Vienna played a key role. The city was full of contradictions. Stunning architecture, opera houses, an intellectual life on one side, and extreme poverty, homelessness, and bitter ethnic divisions on the other. Vienna was the capital of a multi-ethnic empire. Germans, Hungarians, Czechs, Jews, Slavs, Roma, all struggling to coexist. And in this melting pot, anti-Semitism was everywhere. Newspapers spewed conspiracy theories. Politicians like Mayor Karl Lueger gained power with openly racist, anti-Jewish rhetoric. Hitler, the struggling outsider, absorbed these ideas eagerly. He convinced himself that Jews were not just another group of people, but a dangerous race, poisoning art, politics, and society. He began ranting to his only friend, August Kubizek, about destiny, race, and power. August described him as passionate, arrogant, quick to anger, but also magnetic when he spoke. Adolf was no longer just a failed artist. He was a man building a worldview. Dark, dangerous, and absolute. By his early 20s, Adolf was still a drifter. He hated Austria-Hungary, calling it a prison of nations. He despised the Habsburg monarchy and its multi-ethnic empire. Instead, he dreamed of a greater Germany, a pure German nation united under one banner. At 24, he slipped away to Munich, Germany, avoiding military service in Austria. He was broke, aimless, and bitter. Then came 1914. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand set Europe ablaze. Nations declared war, and crowds across Germany erupted in patriotic celebration. For Adolf, this was salvation. He volunteered for the German army. Finally, he had a cause, a uniform, a brotherhood. Hitler served in the Bavarian army, fighting on the Western Front. He was a messenger, dotting through trenches under fire, delivering orders. His courage earned him the Iron Cross First Class, a rare honor for a soldier of his rank. Despite the mud, the blood, and the death all around him, Hitler later claimed the war was the best time of his life. For once, he felt purpose. For once, he belonged. But fate was cruel again. In 1916, a shell injured his leg. In 1918, mustard gas temporarily blinded him. As he lay in hospital, news arrived. Germany had lost the war. The Kaiser abdicated. The empire collapsed, and the Treaty of Versailles imposed crushing reparations, stripping Germany of land, money, and pride. For millions of Germans, it was humiliation. For Hitler, it was betrayal. He convinced himself that Germany had not truly been defeated on the battlefield. No, it had been stabbed in the back by internal enemies, communists, Marxists, and above all, Jews. Hatroot burned in him, and in the ashes of defeat, a monster was ready to rise. The failed artist, the grieving son, the homeless drifter, the wounded soldier, all of these fragments came together to form Adolf Hitler. But how did this bitter ex-soldier transform into the leader of a movement, the architect of a party, the dictator who would plunge the world into war? Germany, 1919? The empire has collapsed. The Kaiser has fled. The proud nation lies broken, humiliated, stripped of its dignity by the Treaty of Versailles. And somewhere in Munich, a wounded ex-soldier, angry and aimless, is about to find his destiny. His name is Adolf Hitler. After World War I, Germany was chaos. Inflation soared. Millions were unemployed. Food was scarce. Political extremists battled in the streets. The newly formed Weimar Republic struggled to survive. Amid this turmoil, Adolf Hitler, a discharged corporal, wandered Munich. He still wore his uniform, clinging to the only identity he had left. He despised the politicians who had signed the Treaty of Versailles, branding them traitors, and he despised Jews and communists, whom he blamed for Germany's collapse. In 1919, fate intervened. The army sent him to spy on a tiny political group, the German Workers' Party. Hitler attended their meeting, and something clicked. At first, the German Workers' Party was just a handful of men ranting in beer halls. But when Hitler stood up to speak, everything changed. His voice was sharp, his eyes intense. He raged against Versailles, against Jews, against communists, against the weakness of the Republic. The audience was electrified. Here was a man who could articulate their anger. The party leaders quickly invited him to join. Hitler accepted. Soon, he wasn't just a member. He was the star. In 1920, the group rebranded itself as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. Hitler designed the party's striking symbol, the swastika in a white circle on a red flag. Bold, simple, unforgettable. He understood that politics was theater, and he was its leading actor. As the Nazi Party grew, Hitler drew larger crowds. He shouted, gestured wildly, his speeches fueled by fury and fire. His words offered a simple explanation for Germany's suffering. The Treaty of Versailles had humiliated the nation. Jews and communists had betrayed it from within, and only a strong, united, pure Germany could rise again. In 1923, Hitler decided it was time for action. Inspired by Mussolini's March on Rome, he attempted his own coup in Bavaria. The beer hall putsch. Storming into a Munich beer hall with armed supporters, he declared a national revolution. But the coup failed miserably. Police opened fire. 16 Nazis were killed. Hitler was arrested and charged with treason. At first, it seemed his political career was over. But in prison, Hitler found opportunity. Hitler's trial became a stage. He used it to spread his message to the nation, painting himself as a patriot who dared to defy corrupt politicians. The judges, sympathetic to his nationalism, gave him a lenient sentence. In Landsberg prison, Hitler dictated his manifesto. Mein Kampf, my struggle. It outlined his worldview. History was a racial struggle. The German Aryan was the master race. Jews were the eternal enemy. Germany must expand eastward, seizing living space. By the time he was released after just 9 months, Hitler was no longer a failed revolutionary. He was the prophet of a movement. The Nazis reorganized. Hitler knew that power couldn't be seized by force. It had to be won through politics. He built a propaganda machine, posters, symbols, rallies. The SAA, or Brown Shirts, acted as the party's paramilitary wing, marching through streets, clashing with communists, intimidating opponents. Still, in the mid-1920s, the party was small. Most Germans dismissed Hitler as a fringe radical. But then, the world changed. In 1929, the global stock market crashed. Germany, already crippled by reparations, was devastated. Businesses collapsed. Banks failed. Millions were thrown into poverty. Desperation spread like wildfire. And in desperation, people looked for answers. Hitler provided them. His speeches promised jobs, stability, and national pride. He offered scapegoats. Jews, communists, the November criminals of Versailles. He promised to make Germany great again. The Nazi Party's support skyrocketed. Once dismissed as fanatics, they became a powerful political force. By 1932, the Nazis were the largest party in the Reich, but they still lacked ultimate authority. Hitler demanded the chancellorship, but President Hindenburg despised him, calling him that bohemian corporal. Yet political deadlock forced Hindenburg's advisors to make a fateful decision. They believed they could control Hitler, use him as a puppet to stabilize the government. On January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. It was a moment that would change the world forever. At first, Hitler's power was limited, but he moved quickly. Weeks later, the Reichstag fire erupted. Hitler blamed communists and used the crisis to demand emergency powers. Civil liberties were suspended. Political opponents were arrested. Then came the Enabling Act, giving Hitler the authority to rule by decree. Democracy was dismantled. Opposition parties were outlawed. The SA was replaced by the more loyal and disciplined SS, led by Heinrich Himmler. The Gestapo hunted enemies of the regime. Hitler's word became law. The new Germany. The transformation was swift. Books were burned. Jews were boycotted. Schools indoctrinated children with Nazi ideology. Huge rallies at Nuremberg showcased Hitler as a messianic figure. Germany was reborn, not as a democracy, but as a dictatorship. For the millions who cheered him, Hitler brought hope, jobs, and national pride. For the millions he hated, he brought terror. By the late 1930s, Hitler's ambitions grew bolder. He remilitarized the Rhineland, annexed Austria, and demanded the Sudetenland. Each gamble paid off. The world's leaders appeased him, desperate to avoid another war, but Hitler wanted more. His dream of a greater Germany, an empire carved out of Eastern Europe, would soon ignite the deadliest conflict in human history. The innocent child of the failed artist of Vienna, the angry soldier of Munich, the revolutionary of the beer halls. Now he was 4. The dictator of Germany. The stage was set. The world would soon pay the price for his rise.